Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. The show is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. All right, welcome into this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. This is the 232nd episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thanks, as always, for listening, interacting, just being interested in Boston Bruins hockey and talking about it. We love this. I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns for the Boston Sports Journal, so check that out as well. I do a weekly Q&A also with the subscribers there to make sure to subscribe to the Boston Sports Journal. With me today, longtime friend and colleague, theboston.com's Conor Ryan. Conor, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Joe. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Always a pleasure, especially these morning podcasts when the Bruins are on the West Coast and it's a quick turnaround time. I always appreciate the bright and early, bushy-tailed commentary from everybody jumping on this podcast. So let's get right into it, Conor. Your take, just I guess you could lump the Vegas game and the Tampa game together, kind of in a little block here of what we've seen the last couple of games. But your take mostly on Vegas and kind of them losing a couple games in a row after getting off to the 3-0 start.
Yeah, I agree, Joe, in terms of you can kind of make the game against Las Vegas kind of cut from the same cloth as the Tampa one, where you like the resiliency, right? You like the fact they don't roll over. You could make the case that much like the Tampa game, if this was last year, the Bruins probably lose this game in Las Vegas 8-2. It just is an uncompetitive kind of game. So you give them credit. I think like you're encouraged by the fact that this team under Marco Sturm, they're not rolling over. They're still in the fight for games where there's multiple times where I think you watch how it plays out and you're like, all right, that's the backbreaker. Like, how is the game going to get away and snowball away from them? And they keep on playing, which is encouraging. But the opposite, the flip side of that, you also, I think, and it's kind of how Marco Sturm seemed to sum up the game in his post-game comments, you're frustrated because, yeah, you have that fight, but you're putting yourself behind the eight ball way too much. Like, there's way too much of self-inflicted miscues, way too much of, defensive breakdowns. And I think if it's like a one game like Tampa, you find the silver linings in that, where it's a game against Vegas where you had a great opportunity to, at the very least, get a point out of that game. You're on this, road trip, a good, gut check time early on in the season to see where you're at. If you're able to, come back and get a point or something like that, you feel good about where your team is at, right, as far as building off of what you've seen so far to start the year. But, again, way too many defensive breakdowns, lapses in execution on special teams, and then you look at that, the way that game played out, you love what you get from the bottom six in that game, right? I mean, look at all the goal scorers you have. You have Asimon, Corrali, Kastelik, Zadorov, which for a second it looked like Jeffrey Viel was the guy that was going to get credit for that goal. And then where's your top six? Yeah, Jano, right? And then where's your top six in that? It's one of those games where, yeah, you can find the positives, but I'm sure Marco Sturm's looking at that game afterwards. They go over the tape, and it's like, if our defense was just a little bit more buttoned up, and if some of our top six showed up in that game, we'll leave him with a point or two. And so I'm sure probably for him that's frustrating that you couldn't, as good as this team is showing some positive signs, you're wishing that there was something a little bit more buttoned up, I think.
Yeah, and here's Marco Sturm's quote after the game. Easy breakdowns, just easy mistakes. I would say easy mistakes on the reads, too. And not just from our young guys, from our top guys, too. It's hard. When you were going to chase that game, it's hard to come back. We knew it was going to be tough here, but we just have to be smart. That's not our standard. We just need to be way better. We need to buy in on our defensive effort, and that wasn't the case today. And I think that's well said, and I think that's right. It was not their standard. It's their slippage defensively from the first couple of games. They were chasing the game. For most of the last two games, they have been chasing against good teams. And you are not going to accumulate a lot of points. You're not going to win a lot of games when you're chasing against good teams. To your point, Last year, if they gave up that shorthanded goal at the end of the second period, the third period on the road would have been an absolute abomination, and they would have lost by 7 or 8 goals.
Right.
So, like, you can definitely see that is not going to happen. I had a feeling that was not going to happen this year. They fought and got back and made it a 1-goal game and had a chance to tie it up, pulled the goalie at the end, and they lost by a goal against Tampa as well. They came clawed back in that game, but. You're not going to win a lot of games when you're playing catch up and clawing to try to come back against these teams. I think that's the bottom line. And I there's definitely I don't think it is sustainable for this team to win games against good teams when their top 6 just doesn't show up and isn't pulling their end of the weight. And they were part of a very sleepy start against Tampa Bay. I put a lot of that on Charlie McAvoy, and I talked about that in the last podcast, where like you can't want to be a captain of a team and be caught napping at the beginning of a game and cough up a puck, get caught from behind, lose track of where Jake Gunsel is, for God's sake, one of the best players in the world, and he comes and strips you and it turns into a goal. Like, it's hard to justify somebody being wearing the C and being the leader on the team when they have lapses like that. Even as talented as Charlie McAvoy is, as good a player as he is, I had serious issues with his beginning against Tampa Bay, but he wasn't the only one. I thought the entire top line was not ready to go at the beginning of that game either. And I thought the second line against Vegas was dreadful, terrible. Victor Arvidsson, no show. Casey Middlestat, no show, plus that horrible pass on the power play that turned into the shorthanded goal going the other way. Pavel Zacha, not much better. He takes a high sticking double minor where they're killing off for most of the second period as a result of that. So, the top line was not great either, certainly, and not productive. But I thought the second line was a liability. They were even worse. And you can't get away with that against a team like Vegas, especially a team that, Connor, it looks to me like, just from watching that one game, like Vegas's power play is going to be unstoppable this year if everybody's healthy. When you watch Marner and Eichel, and they have the Russian sniper there on the right-hand side, Dorofeyev, who was like
terrifying,
cranking shots off from the dot because so much defensive attention was being paid to the other two guys and the other guys on the other side of the ice. I mean, that looks like a well-coached a machine that is going to crank out power play goals, and they got the first 2 power play goals against the Bruins this year. But I don't think there's a lot of shame in that for the Bruins. I thought shorthanded they did a pretty good job for the amount of power plays that they gave them, and you can't fault them for getting Dorofeyev wide open looks on the weak side, because he's going to get that against a lot of teams.
Yeah, it's almost like the PK was almost a microcosm of that game where, man, there's a lot that you really like about their resilience, right? Because you look at that 5-on-3 for, what was it, 1:30? Yeah. You're like, yeah, you see the personnel Vegas has out there. Those 3 guys, plus you got Mark Stone, who's one of the best wings.
Yep.
You got Hurdle out there as well. You look at just the personnel, and you're like, all right, well, if they get 1 goal out of this, you probably take that as a good day at the office as far as the PK was kind of matched up against. And again, credit to, I think Swayman made some key saves. I think Corrali's been really good, I think, as expected on the PK. Zadorov, I think, has been good on the PK. So you take those positives and you're feeling good about where this team is at as far as dealing with adversity. And then, later in the game, William Karlsson, the Bruins had, I don't know what the structure was there. It was like the guys at the airport with on the runway with the things, had a clear lane, drove right to, he went past Yoki Haru, I think it was, had a clear look at it. I was like, what is that? And so I almost think that PK, right, is kind of sums up how the game is, where, man, there's a lot that you like about it, but this team and the personnel they have, you can't have it be 80% great. You have to be really dialed in on so many different things for this team to be competitive. And yet you'll take it that they're showing resolve. You'll take it that the bottom 6 is doing really well, but I don't know how sustainable that is over the course of a season, right? Remember last year it was October, and the best line in hockey for the first 4 or 5 games was Beecher, Cole Koepke, and Kastelik. That wasn't sustainable. We all know that, right? So it is, you have to have your guys, especially your top guys, deliver and be much more consistent. Because I agree, that second line, which I thought had a pretty good start to the year, they got
Yep.
smoked by Vegas' second line in that game. They gave you next to nothing, and you just can't have that the way this team is built.
No, gave you nothing offensively. We're a liability defensively. That's about as bad as it gets. That was a no good, horrible, terrible game for them. They did get off to a good start this year, though. I think you're right, and so I expect them to bounce back. And I think the whole team is capable of bouncing back. And it's I thought it was interesting after the game too that Marco Sturm talked about almost being happy that these results were coming with the level of effort they were giving defensively and discipline that they were showing and buy-in that they were showing defensively. He said he was almost saying he was glad that they were getting negative results for not putting in the work and not working up to the standard of what he expects defensively, because it just gives him ammunition to say, do we want to lose games, and are we going to go through this all year where it's not going to be good enough because you're not buying in, you're not doing all the right things, you're not paying attention to detail, you're not closing off lanes in the defensive zone. There's different things that you're doing that we're trying to preach to you. I mean, he talked uh, after the game was over about like the back door and Dorofeyev, like we're talking about, like they were warned before the game that this is what Vegas is going to do, and they were giving them a ton of wide open looks on the back door. And I think that should be effective, and I liked to hear that from Sturm, where he's kind of calling them on the carpet and saying, if you're not going to listen to what we're saying and you're not going to buy into what we're trying to sell you to do, and less offense and less looseness to your game and more conservative defensive structure, like this is what's going to happen against good teams, and it's going to be the same old, same old. So I do expect them to be able to tighten the screws on that. I do expect them to get better, and it's kind of a good thing almost, Connor. I'm going to be honest with you that like after a 3-game start where everybody's saying everything is awesome and puffing their chest about how good the Bruins are, that they play a couple of good teams and they come back to reality a little bit and realize the way that they have to play and that they sort of have to get back to basics. And I think this gives Sturm and his coaches a lot of ammunition to get them playing the right way. And I fully expect them to adjust and to be able to do that on the road with the remaining games on the trip.
Yeah, I almost feel like Sturm's comments, it kind of, again, as far as the timing of it, and he's glad that it's playing out now. It's almost, you look at the way they stat, right? They win 3 straight games. And I think for Sturm and his staff, it's almost like you can tell the team, like, hey, we're in these games, like, we've won games out of the gate. We're not rolling over. Like, we're a good team. What we're doing is working, but we're not
Yep.
going to get points if you guys keep on, shooting yourselves in the foot. Like,
Yep.
I think it's almost validating for all that Sturm and his staff have been doing as far as overhauling so much during, camp, changing so much around, that to start off with those 3 wins. And yeah, you could say it was, Chicago, Buffalo, what have you. Win's a win. And especially I think for a coach early on to have those immediate results gets
Yep.
that buy-in. I think the players have generally bought into like what he's been preaching. So yeah, I almost feel like the timing is good where you can get those immediate results and you're still in these games. But when they look at the tape, they can see that, hey, if we correct 1 or 2 things, if our guys show up when we needed them to in Vegas, if we don't sleepwalk through the first 20 minutes of that game in Tampa, we might be like 5-0 right now. We might be 4-0-1 or something like that. So
Yep.
I do think like the way they've started and the fact that you have, as you said, kind of that reality check is encouraging, because it's also not like, to what we said, it's not like they didn't show up and they're getting their ass kicked and they're just, in these lopsided games where you mail it in after the first 2 minutes of the third period or anything like
Yep.
that. Like it feels like guys are listening. It's just that you need, I think, that gut check to again validate that, yeah, maybe we are better than we expect, but we're not that great. We can't lapse and be operating at 60% and still, squeeze out a point or something out of it. We need to be really dialed in to stay competitive, especially against these really good teams that you look on the ice when the game's going on, or even on paper. There's a lot of teams that are a lot better than you right now.
Yeah, and I think part of it is there's some cheating going on offensively, and that's
Yeah.
creating some of the defensive issues that we're seeing. Um, is sort of like I think the team knows that they don't have the offensive firepower that some other teams do, so they're almost trying to cheat a little bit to the offensive end to generate a little bit more offense to offset what they don't think that they have, and that creates some holes that can be exploited defensively. And I almost think that's a little bit of what's going on here. And I think Marco Sturm has to pull back the reins like he's doing and be like, whoa, this is not what we're about. Like, we want to win 3-2, 2-1. Like, we do not want to get into 6-5 shootouts with the Vegas Golden Knights, because that is not going to benefit us. And that's not really playing to our strengths. That's playing to their strengths. And I think it should be noted too, that I got to say, like, they lost 6-5. He gave up 6 goals. I thought Jeremy Swayman was really, really good in this game, and I do not think he was the issue at all in that loss. And I think he's been excellent to start the year. And I think that's another thing you can put in the very encouraging category, is that your goaltending is going to be elite this year. You can see it already that Swayman is locked in. He's playing really well, and there's no reason to think it's going to be any different as we get into the weeds of the season. And I personally like that we're seeing Korpisalo sprinkled in a lot too at the beginning of the year. And I think that's going to benefit both of them as the year goes on and benefit the team. But I think, we've seen Swayman 3 times now, and I've liked his game in all 3 games. And I think he's been really strong between the pipes. And I think that's a very encouraging sign.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that Marcus Sturm said after the game that he pretty much said that he thought Swayman was excellent, because it does feel like that's a game where a lot of people who weren't watching it, they wake up the next morning, look at the box score immediately and be like, geez, like,
Yeah.
he had all these fourth line guys step up and Swayman gave it away. Like, no, if you watch the game, I agree. Like, I mean, that game could have been lopsided right out of the gate, especially with the way that 5-on-3 was. Like, they easily could have scored a couple of goals there if it wasn't for Swayman stepping up. So I agree. It again, I think adds to the frustration of you had a really good dialed in game from Swayman and you just still couldn't get across that extra goal or tighten things up down the other end of the ice enough to kind of change your fortune there, because he was playing at such a high level. But I do agree that you look at it as far as like mapping out the long-term consequences of a game like this, the things of like the top 6 not showing up at 5-on-5, like guys like Pasternak and Geeky, I feel more confident that they're going to bounce back, right? The D zone, you can tighten those things up where I'm hoping at least they're not giving up 5 or 6 goals a game. If it was like Jeremy Swayman was just out to lunch and was looking like he was last year, that's when you look at your team and you're like, oh, they got bigger problems if he's going to really kind of give away games like that. And that, I agree, wasn't the case. I thought he was good. He was sharp. And it's, I think, the best sign that, as Jeremy Swayman goes, so goes the 25-26 Bruins, I think. And kind of from what you've seen so far, if he's playing like that, they're going to be in every single game if he's locked in playing like at that level.
Yeah, he's going to give them a chance to win, and he's going to make the saves that he's supposed to make, and then some. And I think that is ultra important to them having success this year, and them being able to play that defensive style and know that the goalie behind them is going to stop everything that he's supposed to stop, and that's going to allow them, I think, to embrace that style maybe a little bit more and be okay with playing that way. Where I think even if they played that way last year, and then when they did play that way last year, there were times Swayman was giving up leaky goals, and that is part of the reason the house collapsed on itself. Is just you can't play a defensive conservative style if you're not getting goaltending. It's just gonna it's gonna drive you insane. There's gonna after a while, as a player, you're gonna be like, why are we even doing this? If pucks are gonna go in anyway when we're keeping everything to the outside. Encouraging sign, Connor, Hampus Lindholm skating with the group. Sounds like he's going to near a return at some point. I took it as an encouraging sign that he was on the road trip to begin with. And it seems like this is not going to be a long-standing thing that's connected to last year's kneecap. I mean, we still don't know exactly what's going on with him. But it's good to see him skating and that he's going to return soon. And I do think last night maybe was the first time I watched a game and I was like, you know what? They kind of miss Hampus Lindholm here. His presence, his ability to play big minutes, his work in the D zone, everything that he does and brings to the table, I think was missed a little bit in that game.
Yeah, I think you eventually kind of saw a little bit of those cracks there. And I think the Bruins dodged a major bullet as far as you worry immediately that's that knee where that's an injury that either really saps away a lot of your capabilities, or it's one that opens the door to a lot of reoccurrences or stuff like that. I mean, we saw Kevin Miller, like how
Yep.
that just ended his career, right? So that's a very scary injury. So good news that it seems like, again, it's not ideal that he's hurt, but good that it doesn't seem like it's the same injury and that ideally he's back at some point on this road trip. And I agree that he's a guy that when he's playing to the level that we've seen him at, he just impacts the game in so many different ways. Yeah, he's great in the D zone, can give you a lot of minutes, but he's so good with that first pass. He's good in transition, which this team I think has really struggled with. It's just puck management, and he's a guy that's kind of slow and steady in that regard. I even think offensively, right? Like he's a player that you look at this decor and the fact that this team needs to generate offense in a variety of ways. I think he's one of the better guys as far as reading the play, activating without putting himself in a bad spot, can get pucks through to the net from the blue line. And he's even a guy that I wonder if you look at the power play and if it continues to struggle, I do wonder if he's a guy that makes a push for either a greater role there, even if it's the top power play unit. I just feel like Charlie McAvoy's been in that spot for a while, but I do wonder if they do have to make some tweaks because you can look at like the underlying numbers, you can look at just like the eye test. Lindholm has been really, really strong when he's on that top power play. I don't know if it's just the left shot part of it, and he's easier to kind of whip that puck around, but seems like he's much more quick thinking, decisive with the puck up high, and I think that's kind of what the Bruins need. So we'll see how they handle that moving forward, but I think just having a healthy Lindholm opens up so many more doors for what Sturm and his staff can do.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as the year goes on, I think we're going to see more Lindholm and or Lohrei work in that top power play unit, and I think they'll get reps with them as well. Lindholm when he gets healthy, Lohrei when he maybe is playing with a little bit higher level of confidence than he's been at the beginning of the year. And I will say I thought Lohrei was good last night. I thought that was one of his best games so far. He seemed a little shaky with the puck the first few games, but I thought he was good. He assisted on a goal last night. He was a plus player, and he played, I think, close to 20 minutes. Like, I liked his game. And I think progressively as the year's gone on, he started regaining maybe some of that confidence that he lost at the end of last year when things were really, went south for him in the last couple months of the year when he had to play a bigger role. But I totally agree. I think we're going to see different players on that power play unit at the point and at that quarterback spot. And I will say it to the end of time. I really like McAvoy as a player. I like a lot of what he brings to the table. I think he's got very good skating and stick skills. I think he is a very physical player. I think there are times where he can be a momentum changer and a game changer with the way that he plays. But I also think there are limitations to his game at times that I think you just need to accept at this point when he's 26, 27 years old. You know what I mean? I think he is what he is as a player, and you can't expect him to do certain things that maybe he's just not going to be able to do consistently. And putting him in the best places to succeed for both the team and for him, I think is a great thing. And that may mean putting him on the second power play and putting in somebody else on the first power play. And I think that happened as a Zdeno Chara at a certain point in his career too, where he just was no longer on the top power play anymore and they went in a different direction. And I think it worked out famously for him and for the team when that happened. So there's certainly no shame in that at all. All right, let's take a break to talk about our sponsors real quick. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. PrizePicks also offers injury reboots. If any of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks won't count it as a loss. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on PrizePicks. They also offer Venmo and MasterCard and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account to support the season. Our picks for this week are Dylan Larkin, more than 20 minutes of ice time, Sam Reinhart, more than 1.5 shots on goal, and Tage Thompson, more than 2.5 shots on goal. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 in lineups after you play your first lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. We also want to let you know that you are listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, and we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content from guys like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, the NBA History Channel, Patriots Press Pass, and the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right, let's get back into it. Connor, your most pleasant surprise after the first 5 games of the year, somebody who you've been impressed with that's maybe gone above what you expected, maybe different than what you saw in the preseason, or somebody that you had a certain expectation for and they've surpassed it to this point.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a lot of guys that warrant a nomination there. You know what? I'll go with a guy like Tanner Jeannot, who I would say probably you look at the bottom 6, and I think he's probably just part of that conglomeration, right, of guys that I think maybe you had low expectations for, but I think he's been as advertised as far as, obviously you see the physicality, but the biggest question mark for him, and I think the reason why people looked at that contract initially and they were like, oh, we kind of like what he could be as a player, but that value really wanes if he's going to be giving you, 6-7 goals a season. I like just the fact that he's been, strong down at the net front. He's kind of the player that you need. And I think Marco Sturm has been candid, right, as far as acknowledging this team's offensive limitations. And I think if you're going to consistently generate goals, you're not going to be cashing in on the rush. You don't have the skill like Vegas. So it's going to be a lot of, I think, greasy goals. And I think Jeannot is a guy that fits that bill. And I think he's been active so far. I think he's, having him next to a guy like Fraser Minton can really help out him as a younger player. And so there's a lot of guys in that bottom 6 that I think have really stood out so far. I think Crowley being back has been huge.
Yep.
Kastelik in October might be like the best, like one of the best hockey players out there, because
Mr. October
dialed in right from the start. Yeah, Mr. October. But I'll go with a guy like Jeannot, who I think people were pretty down on when that contract first signs. But if you can be a guy that gives you 15 goals and plays a physical brand of hockey, for what that contract is, you'll take that player at a bottom 6 spot. So I think he's a guy that had some question marks, but has been as advertised. But I think there's a lot of guys that have exceeded expectations, at least out of the gate.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's definitely a lot of guys you could point at and say they're doing their job, and maybe then some a little bit. I like your pick. I've liked Jeannot a lot. And you look, every good hockey team needs to have a couple garbage men on it that like take care of the pucks around the net and will score goals and go hard to the net and will make sure those rebounds end up in the back of the net and end up on the scoreboard. And I think that's a big part of his game. And it should be. He's big, strong, physical forward. Like, that's how he should be scoring goals. Like, that is a great place for him to be and to keep getting to. And where he's going to find them. And like, when you see a guy like that that's gotten to the 20-plus goal mark before in his career, I think you can kind of take it as, like, if he stays healthy, he's going to get double-digit goals, especially if he's playing with decent players. And if he can do that, if he drops the gloves every once in a while, if he intimidates the other team and throws, a lot of physicality at them and nastiness, like, that's a great add to your team. And I was not one of those people that poo-pooed that contract and had a problem with it and thought, oh, why did they give him 5 years? Why did they give him that kind of money? At the end of the day, they were going to give that money to Trent Frederick at some point, right? Or they thought they were. And then I think they made a determination that Trent Frederick's not the guy. He is not that guy that we want to give that contract to play that role. Like, he can't do it consistently. Maybe he doesn't want to do it consistently. Maybe he thinks he's more of a skill guy and less of a guy that should be getting to the front of the net, scoring, cashing in on rebounds, hitting, like, doing the dirty work. And I think maybe some of that mentality comes down, Connor, to a guy that was a first-round pick versus a guy that Tanner Jeannot, that was undrafted, had to go through the coast and play on all these different teams and had to basically fight for a spot in the NHL and had to do whatever was necessary to get there, where I don't think Trent Frederick has always had to do that. And it's been more of a choice rather than necessity. And I think that, like, bleeds into their mentality of who they are as players a little bit. And I think you need to have guys like Jeannot who are going to scrap for everything that they've ever gotten and will continue to do that and aren't going to lose that mentality because you gave them a 5-year contract and you're paying them like $3 million a year, And I think Jeannot is one of those guys, and I think that's something that maybe is lost sometimes with fans. And as I love the fancy stats brigade, Connor, when they pull out the bar graphs to try to tell you whether a player is good or not. Sometimes I think that those elements and those qualities get forgotten. I think we forget sometimes that these players are human beings that have certain motivations and certain backgrounds and certain makeups, and that goes into how they play and who they are and how they consistently approach things. And I think Jeannot is one of those guys that you understand why he plays the way he does and who he is, and he embraces who he is as a player, and he's not going to change the way he plays, whether he's got the money or the long-term security or not. And I think we're seeing that in the early going. Now it comes down to him staying healthy and playing that physical styles, being able to play, 65 plus games to make sure the production matches up with what you're paying.
Yeah, it's almost like I look at what Sturm especially said throughout training camp of like this team needs an identity. And I think it helps when you also have a player like Jeannot that, as you said, he's not a guy that is a former first round pick and he's kind of towing the line to what he can be. He knows his role, right? And I feel like when you look at a lot of the guys the Bruins signed, you know what to expect out of them. They know what to expect out of themselves as far as what their role, what they need to do. And I think if you're the Bruins and you're trying to get back to a standard, you're trying to build an identity, which I don't think the 24-25 Bruins had any sort of identity or had any sort of sense of what they were night in and night out. I don't think even they knew. Opponents didn't know what to expect, other than the fact they knew they were going to score like 7 goals against them. Like I think bringing in a lot of guys that know what they need to do just helps you kind of have that team-wide identity as far as what your bottom six is, what guys are going to expect, and what they're expecting out of their teammates and their line mates as well. So I do think that also plays into for Jeannot, where, yeah, he's one of the more physical guys out there. He's going to stand up to his teammates. You hope he gives you double-digit goals, but also you know what to expect from a guy like that. I think that's when you look at, I think, the Bruins' overall approach in free agency, bringing in so many of those guys that, maybe they don't have the highest upside. Maybe the fancy stats aren't always like looking all that great, but you know what to expect. And I think for a team that just needed to kind of get back to a standard, get back to playing the way they need to play moving forward, especially as far as maybe building a sustainable thing, not just for this year, but in the years ahead. I think having some of those guys in place were the guys they needed to bring in.
Yeah, definitely. And they needed a change in mentality. And they needed to inject more of the juice, as Don Sweeney called it. And I think they have. And I think that part is there. I would give honorable mention to maybe somebody that's surpassed my expectations, to Jordan Harris, who I thought was excellent in those first couple of games with Hampus Lindholm out. I do think last night he got a little too happy trying to make things happen offensively, which you could see the way he didn't hesitate when he scored that goal against Tampa, I think it was. Yeah. And Pastrnak, and he basically turned into a forward where Pastrnak bounced a pass off the boards and they went in for a 2-on-1 and he scored. I like the fact that there was no hesitation to him jumping up into the play and making that goal happen. But it also made me wonder, is he going to be a guy that is going to maybe be a little too happy to jump up offensively and going to leave them in some tough spots at times? And you saw Victor Arvidsson absolutely get turnstile trying to play D and cover for him at one point during that game last night. And I think that's tough to ask a forward like that to try to, stop a world-class player going the other way because you got caught up ice. And I would say last night you maybe started to see the full picture of him and what can happen at certain points with him and his tendencies and what he does. But I still think he's going to help them a ton. He creates in the offensive zone. I like the fact that they brought in a defenseman that definitely has some ability to make plays happen in the offensive zone. And I think, there's a happy balance for him and a happy medium. But I think it speaks to just the depth that they're going to have. The fact that they have a guy like that as a seventh defenseman now that can come in and really do the job and make an impact, I think speaks very well to their depth at the NHL, along with having a guy like Michael Callahan in Providence, who we all know can play, and Brunet, who's an up-and-comer. They have some really good depth, especially on the left side defensively this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Harris, especially those first 2 games, is really encouraging. He's a guy that, even though he hasn't had a long sample size or a full season of 80-plus games under his belt, he's shown pretty strong signs of being a guy that could be an everyday player. You look at just how poised he is with the puck. He had that one year in Montreal where I think he played around 60 games and had like 16, 17 points. So, yeah, you like that he's making the right reads. He's really decisive with the puck, which is I think a thing that has hurt some other guys that have been puck handling so far this year as far as puck management. So it's
Yep.
almost he kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Grizzly where makes smart quick plays and then kind of gets out of things, right? Doesn't hold on to the puck, doesn't put himself in harm's way that much, and especially if that's more of your seventh D doing that job, I think that brings a lot of value as opposed to a guy that's playing 19 to 20 minutes a night is in a starting role. If that's your seventh defenseman, you got a pretty good option back there, and a guy that I don't think it would take a lot for Sturm to call on him when needed, even if guys are healthy, just to have a little bit of a different element on that decor.
No, definitely not. And the fact he's from Haverhill is just makes it all the better.
Yes,
Great to have
absolutely.
local kids that can play in that dressing room. Was awesome in training camp. I was talking to him a little bit about his time playing with the Minuteman Flames when he was growing up, and said he basically grew up at the NESC in Marlboro, the airport, as I like to call it, with the 8 sheets.
Yes.
That friggin' place is ridiculous. But he spent a lot of his youth there playing games and knee hockey and everything else. So it's cool to see players like that, kids like that grew up in Massachusetts, get to live out their dreams playing with the Bruins. And I know he said he couldn't stop when he jumped into the glass after he scored the other day. But I think that was a little kid coming out in him a little bit in that first goal. He scored as a Bruin, something he's probably dreamed about all of his life. So he let the little kid out to jump into the glass for a minute before he went back to being a grizzled veteran NHL player where it's no big deal. And it was awesome to see. So congrats to him and his family on him, like just living out his dream. I think that's awesome. And being a very viable, helpful part of that team. On the flip side of that, Connor, biggest disappointment or player so far that you've looked at and said they're not getting what they need to get out of this player?
I'll go with Victor Arvidsson. I feel like he's a
Yeah.
guy that just for a player that you signed that or traded for, where I think you're banking on him. Yeah, maybe he's not the 30 goal guy he was with Nashville, but for teams so I think stout for just production in the top six. Just need a little bit more from him, right? I feel like you're either seeing times where he's either getting crunched along the boards, or
Yep.
he's kind of an interesting player because you watch him when he's got the puck on his stick. It's almost like he is like a runaway train where he's just charging ahead and he doesn't really know what exactly to do, and then he ends up either like smashing into the end boards or like the puck kind of goes into no man's land. So
Yes.
he's an interesting player because you don't watch too much of him when he's out
No.
with like Edmonton or something like that. So you just see him and you imagine, all right, quick winger can fire off a couple of shots here and there, but kind of a chaotic player so
He
far is
is.
probably what I kind of describe him as, and I think you just need a little bit more from that spot. Like,
Yep.
Zaka, I think as a whole has been pretty good. Middlestad's been, I think, a lot more kind of up and down, but at least you're seeing that he's got some playmaking poise that if you put the right guys around him, you can kind of draw some more production, I think, out of what you can get out of that type of player. But
Yep.
I do think that so far out of the gate, it's been a bit of a black hole there for Arvidsson, where just it can help out here and there, but it feels like there's way too many shifts where the puck either is dying on a stick or it's going to no man's land. And I think you just need a little bit more consistency there for a team that desperately needs some sort of steady option on that second line.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Like, I wouldn't have said that before last night's game, but the
Yeah.
second line I thought was so bad last night that I think you start to look at them in a little bit of a different light. And I think with him not really having a lot of production in those first 5 games, you definitely start to look at him in a different light. I will say, like, I noticed an uptick in speed, intensity, like everything he's doing from the preseason to the regular season. I really didn't think his preseason was anything to write
Yeah.
home about at all.
I
I think
agree.
regular season when he started off, I was like, okay, like he's playing a little bit more to your point, like he shot out of a cannon, a little bit more speed, certainly more intensity, physicality, even more physical player than I thought he was. Watching him throw hits and compete for pucks and things like that, but definitely undersized. Definitely a guy that's going to get smoked a lot. We've seen him get hit quite a bit, but like keeps coming, and keeps playing, which I like to see. And I think eventually that's going to play its way into production. And he looks like a guy that's not going to be afraid to go to the hard areas to make plays, and that's a good thing too. But I will say, like, needs to start producing. Like, we need to start seeing goals, plays that turn into offense. if he's going to play consistently second line winger, he's going to have to make things happen offensively more than he is now, power play wise and 5-on-5 wise. The other guy I would put in that category a little bit is who's Nadinov, because I just don't think he's done enough to merit being in the lineup yet. Like, he's played fast. He's trying to make things happen. I think he's trying to be a responsible player. I think he's trying to bring some energy and do everything. But like, I just don't think he's able to make enough of an impact. He hasn't really moved the needle at all with anything that he's done. And it kind of spoke to why I think he was out of the lineup last night. And they put Jeffrey VL in, who I thought was good. And maybe he stays in the lineup now because I think he played well. I still don't have an explanation as to what happened, why he didn't get that goal, because it looked to me like he celebrated right afterwards like he thought it was his goal. It looked to me like the video showed it hit off his body and went into the net. I don't, it's unclear whether it went off the defenseman or him, but by the way he reacted, it feels like it hit him and it went in. But either way, Zadorov gets the goal. That's, they can fight that out if whoever wants credit for it. But I just thought he was a good addition, and I thought he made some positive impact plays, whereas Nadinov maybe wasn't really doing much of anything to move the needle. And that's a good thing. Again, that speaks to the depth in this team, that you can bring in one of those parts and they help you a little bit and certainly make an impact. I thought he was part of a bottom six that was very effective last night.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see kind of just where Husendinov best fits, right? Because I think you like the speed. I think
Yep.
there's maybe some offensive upside there. He's almost kind of like a Mikey Eastamont, where he's probably more of a bottom six guy, but you see spurts where, he could
Yep.
be a guy that could give you 10 goals or 10 plus goals in the right situation. It's just, where does he kind of best fit on this team? Like,
Yep.
is it a better spot where like AC Mont's on the fourth line and Husendinov in a spot like that? Like, can he play higher up in the lineup? That could be possible, but also he's not going to help his case if he's, again, showing the speed but not doing much else on the fourth line. So I imagine he's going to draw back in eventually, but where exactly I think is the
Yeah.
best spot for Husendinov is why I also think he was kind of in that no man's land at times during training camp preseason, where you're like, all right, he's probably going to make the team, but who does he best kind of fit with? And I think that still is to be determined.
Yeah, I think it is. And then, let's face it, it's 5 games into the season. There's still a lot to be determined, a lot about combinations, who's going to play with who, that it will bear out over time. But overall, I think if you drew up that the Bruins would be 3-2 at this point, I think everybody would be happy. I think people would be pleasantly surprised with some of the wins, and certainly and every game has been super competitive and close. I think this is. I continue to think with this team, Connor, that I feel like the wild card is very achievable, and it's going to be there for them at the end, and they're going to be in the mix for it. A lot is going to depend on what they do at the trade deadline. A lot is going to depend on like what Haggs does at BC, and if he joins the team at the end of the year. And there's a lot of things about this team's story this year that have yet to be written and will be down the line. But like, everything I've seen in the first 5 games backs up how I felt about this team in the preseason, where they're going to be playing meaningful games into April, and they have a decent chance, pretty good chance, I think, to be a wild card team when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I agree, and it kind of goes back to even what Sweeney said in July in free agency, where he said this team is going to be a hot out, and I think people heard that, and I almost feel like at the time people thought that he meant like a hard out in the playoffs, and people were like, "Oh, this dumb team, they're just trying to be tough and gritty in the playoffs, and it doesn't always work." It's like, no, I think he means they're going to be much more competitive. They're going to be in a lot more games. You're not going to have a team that last year a thing went wrong and they mail it in, and all of a sudden they lose games 7-1, 6-2. All these kinds of uncompetitive matchups. And I agree, like, hasn't been perfect. You would like to have had at least maybe 1 point out of these games against Tampa and Vegas, but they're in the mix, right? They don't quit, they don't roll over. They're having a lot of guys step up, and I think that's encouraging. And especially I think when you look at the way the East is right now, where Ottawa's not going to have Brady Tkachuk now for 6+ weeks. You got I think Florida's just going to be fine, but they're a team that's lost 3 in a row that they've got a lot of injuries piling up as well. Like, there is an opportunity for you to, especially early on, if you jump out to a strong start, you can kind of hang in the playoff picture and put yourself in a favorable spot as you kind of go through those expected ups and downs this year. So I think if you're a Bruins fan, you have to be encouraged by, one, the environment the Bruins are in with the way the East is looking right now, and also just how they're playing, where, yeah, they're not perfect. They still got a lot of work to do. There's going to be probably a lot of games this season where you look at the aftermath of being like, man, I don't know what to make of this team. But I think most nights, even if they don't win, they're going to be competitive and they're going to be in the mix to kind of accrue points at a pretty steady rate. If you do that, you're probably going to be in the mix once you get to March and April.
Yes, the social media din of this Bruins team is going to suck, and they're going to get in. They're going to be in the Gavin
McKenna sweepstakes. Yeah, no.
Yes, thank God that chatter has died away, because I think reality has set in that no, this team is going to be a lot better than that, defensively, goaltending wise, and and offense really hasn't been an issue to this point as far as the amount of goals that they're scoring. So I think they're going to be just fine this year, and it's going to be a competitive team to watch and a fun team to watch, frankly, most nights. So, Connor, thank you very much for joining us. Let's also thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Also, if you've been listening to this Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network, make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. Conor Ryan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.